The team has two objectives for today. One, to empower teachers to move to online testing with Aware, and two, to equip teachers with practical tips and strategies to create meaningful and effective online assessments. Today's agenda will help you to author and proctor assessments, see what the student experience is like, enter answers, and to use single test analysis. And now I will turn it over to Emily.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us during your lunchtime. We will try to be brief but cover as much content to support you today as we can. So again, to reiterate what Armando said, we like to open with a little icebreaker for you and rate your comfortability that you have right now with online testing. So again, if you'll use our chat feature, you can give us feedback and tell us if you're still learning, if you're almost there, or you feel like you got it with online learning. And all of the above are great, acceptable answers. We just kind of want to hear from our audience and see where you are today. I like, we got a smiley face. I like it. Almost there. I'm still learning. I got it. We're all over. I like it. So we have an array of audience members today. So hopefully you're here and you want to learn something new, engage and see if there are some new components that will help you to potentially even be more efficient with online testing. So thank you for the feedback. You're welcome to keep adding your thoughts in the chat about where you are with online testing. We will keep checking those out and we will move forward because we do want to honor your lunchtime. That's your important time today. So we want to honor it. All right. We will start out with a brief introduction about why online testing. Well, a lot of reasons. We have multiple different features to support you related to question types, it being customizable, but probably really importantly is that you get your results back immediately when students take online tests. So that's very helpful in nature. It takes out that grading component, that scanning component. We know that students have to do it for state testing now, so it's great to go ahead and make that transition, as we know that it is something that we will continue to utilize moving forward. All right, so we're going to start out with authoring assessments and give you the highlights here and some major key pieces to recognize, and then we'll continue on with the testing experience. So as we get started, we like to reiterate that when you're creating assessments, you have a couple of different options. You can always create a new blank assessment, or you can copy over an existing assessment. We'll lean into this just based on the time of year it is. Please make sure if you are utilizing a test from last year or previous years that you copy an existing test. We have this happen a lot at this time. People just adjust the dates and re-give a test from last year, and you don't want to do that. Make sure you copy that test over so it starts fresh and new for the school year for your students. In addition, you can copy over local assessments. And so you can grab anything from STAR released, all of your assessments from last year, and other assessments that are available for copying. Some additional pieces to also consider when you're creating your assessment is we do have new performance levels now. So making sure that your performance levels are adjusted for the assessment. Again, we always say good data in means good data out. And so you want to make sure that you set these up correctly so that when you're analyzing your data, the information looks accurate and it looks correct. Some other key features, we have all of the different interactive response items that the state offers. We have them available for you to either create from scratch or you can utilize item banks. We support these questions within item banks as well. Some of the item banks that we offer are listed here. So we have several of them: Mastery, Text Bank, Text Resource System. If you are not purchasing some of those additional item banks, every district has STAR release tests. You have all of them from 2012 until today. And you also have your own local item bank. So a lot of districts don't know that, but you can create and contribute to your own local item bank. So anytime a teacher adds a valuable question, you can add it and start gauging and creating your own local item bank that can be utilized in the future. Okay, as you start looking at how you want to add your items, for the most part, users will usually add a variety of different questions. So you may start from scratch on some questions and add them. And then on others, you may search the item bank for support and additional resources as well. So you can choose any of those methods. Within your assessment window, you can see them right in front of you. You have your traditional question types, your interactive question types, and then searching the item bank very easily for you to navigate and begin any one of those. As you are editing the test, something that's nice to remember and some good reminders are making sure that you tie those standards. We give you the option to tie both a primary and a secondary standard. If you do forget, this is always something you can go back and do after you give the assessment, but of course, it's always easier to remember beforehand. We like to also give you reminders that you add your scoring method here as well. So we have new scoring rules with the new star, so it's no longer just correct or incorrect. So making sure that you grab those scoring rules appropriately based on the question type that you are asking. And of course, we're really leaning into making sure districts start utilizing depth of knowledge. All of our new advanced data analysis features really lean into depth of knowledge. So if you're not adding that depth and complexity of the question, then you're missing out on great data analysis later on after you've given the assessment. So again, some of the item banks include these depth of knowledge areas, but if not, there's really not a wrong answer. It's valuable conversation to just start adding this and evaluating depth of knowledge. And then last but not least, item weight. You can leave your item weight at 1, or you can weigh a question heavier than just 1 point. But what is nice to know is this is always an option that if you write a bad test question, and we are all human beings and do this, you can go back and weigh that question at 0 at any time and rescore your test. You still have all the data for it, but it does not count that question against the student. So knowing that you can go back and weigh an item at 0 is always a good little tip to keep in your back pocket. Okay, those scoring rules that we'll lean into, we'll showcase those here for you. We do have, of course, correct, incorrect for multiple choice, points per task, partial credit scoring, and dependency scoring. So if you're looking for that state scoring, it's going to be that partial credit scoring, and it says 0, 1, 2. That will align with the state of Texas and how they are scoring those new interactive items. Okay, so we've already covered a chunk of information so far, so we'll pause and hear back from you again. What has been beneficial in your learning so far? Are you, all of the new item types are aware that was very beneficial for you? You can give us an A. Learning that there are item banks available for you, setting standards and depth of knowledge. D, performance levels, or E, all of the above. Hey, you like everything that we had to show so far? We always like E. Got an A and a B and an E. Lots of E's. All right. My kind of people. All of these are great reminders as we get through everyday practice. We forget some of these things, so we're going to try to give you those tips and tricks with creating assessments as we go along. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. He actually has a great next tip for you to utilize when looking at assessments in Aware.
Thanks, Emily. So the summary panel is something we really want to lean into. It's holistically your test, how we can look at the blueprint to see how we've created our assessment. We can see how many items we have by standard, that depth of complexity, which is so important. How many questions do we have by DOK 1, 2, and 3, right? We don't want to maybe not want to see a test with all of DOK 1 questions. We want to be asking some of those harder questions. But we can also see how many questions we have by item type, right? If we're trying to stick to that 25% rule, we'll be able to see that and say, you know what, we've only asked one interactive item so far, we need to go back and add another. So it's really the blueprint of your test and the level of difficulty of questions we're asking, and are we meeting that 25%? So holistically, we can really see what that test looks like. So make sure you're looking at the summary pad. But something we really want to get through is team test. A lot of times when we create our tests as teachers, by default, they're teacher tests. And when we give those assessments, nobody sees the results except us. Other colleagues who teach that same student cannot see the results. Administrators cannot see the results. Future teachers can't see how those students did on those assessments. And so we really like to create our teacher tests and then share them with the team. By sharing with the team, it allows those other users to see the results, right? I'm not having to give the assessment, look at the data, and then if my administrator needs to see that data, then I have to go and print that for them. So it's very important to share that with your team. And you'll see a little gear setting that lets you manage or create that team, add and remove users. Just know that anytime a user is added to your team, once that test is shared, they'll have just as much control over that team. But we want to make sure to share so that our administrators can see those results. All right. Once you've shared that test with your team, you want to activate that assessment, right? But make sure that you've already shared it. Make sure that the online settings have been set. So we've provided a resource, a checklist of things to do before you activate the assessment, right? So just take a look at that, and then we'll be able to go and actually make that active, right? Share it. We're going to choose the window of when that date or that test will be available, right? And then we want to verify our online settings, and then we're ready to activate, right? So you'll have access to this checklist as well. So we just wanted to make you aware, if you hadn't seen them, we have different types of settings available for you to use. The accessibility features that are listed, those are available to all students on all tests at all times. So they'll be able to highlight text or eliminate answer choices. But then we have some online options as well, and the online options need to be enabled for that specific assessment. Once they're enabled, those options will be available for all students. There's some additional options that will be available that aren't listed, like the lockdown browser, question randomization, text-to-speech language for those students who have that support. And if you're in a Aware Premium district, you'll be able to enable the student confidence rating, right? So all those online options are available to you. And then we have student supports. These designated student supports apply to the individual student, and they can be set as defaults in the student profile tab, or teachers can turn on and off those supports during an individual test administration, right? So if I start or enable it for a student for this test, I'll have to enable it again for the next test until that's set as a default. Okay, so those are some of the options we have available to students. So test proctoring for teachers. Once you've created your test and you've enabled some of those supports and you've made that test active and you're ready to proctor that assessment, you'll be able to start and stop the test for all students who are selected. You'll also be able to view their status. Have they started the test? Is that test inactive? Or are they in progress? Or is the test completed, right? Or graded even, right? So you'll be able to see that progress. And one of the best things is the notes feature. If that student is making notes while they're taking their test, you as the test proctor will be able to view the notes that that student has written or typed while they're taking the online test, okay? So as we think about teacher tests and team tests, what types of tests will you be giving the most this school year? Will they be district assessments that have been shared down, or campus, or will they be teacher or team tests? Right, so we see some district tests, a little bit of team, district and campus. Yeah, so just remember, if it is a test that you're creating, and if it's a teacher level test, and others need to see the results of that assessment, just make sure that you're sharing that with the team before you activate that test.
Okay, thank you for your responses. It looks like we have a variety of tests going on across the different levels, district, campus, team, and teacher. And I'll reiterate what Stephen just said, but we did have a question. If you have teacher teams, can they edit the test together before making it active? And the answer is yes. That is part of the benefit of teacher teams, is that collaborative teamwork on the actual assessment. So it's not just one person creating the assessment, it's a whole team working together to create it, give it, and then share the data out at the campus level. So that is the way we recommend really utilizing tests in Aware. If you're not giving a district test, then a team test is a really, really great option to utilize. All right, we've talked about creating the assessment. We've even talked about proctoring the assessment and the different options of what you can turn on. And now we're going to flip and talk about the student experience and what the student can expect to see and what all they're able to do within Aware. So as we start, students can log into Aware in multiple different ways. So they can use your local URL that you have within the system for your school district to utilize. It's not different per test. It's just based on your school district. You can also do school district sign-ins in multiple different ways. We have Active Directory. We work with ClassLink and various other single sign-on tools. So you can use any of those options to log in for a student. Sometimes the single sign-on and ClassLink, some of those are the best options. They log into one place and it's easy for them to navigate. But if not, you have local control over exactly how a student logs into Aware. All right, as we also cover the student experience, this is exactly what they'll see when they log in. So students can customize their online testing experience. And what we really mean by that is that they're really able to add additional features that you see here. They can go in and they can type in notes. They can change the color theme. They can look at their question guide to make sure that they have answered all of the questions, in addition to flagging questions that they need to go back and review. This is a really important piece too. I always say stop and take time to even go over these tools with your students. You would be surprised how many times students don't help themselves on online tests to do a better job just by utilizing the tools that they have at hand. The question guide is a good example of that. Our questions will not show up with a green check mark unless a student has answered every component of it. So if they have not done every element of the drag and drop, then it's not going to show up with a check mark saying that they have answered that question completely. So guiding them through that experience so that they understand if they've fully given every correct answer they can on the assessment is valuable to keep in mind. We also have a scratch pad tool. We have a ruler. We have various other options for students to begin to even eliminate answer choices as they're going through. They can highlight with 4 different highlighting colors to help keep themselves organized. So lots of different tools, again, that merit themselves doing a quick review with the students so that they understand exactly how to navigate through the online testing. As some of the last pieces, they can as well get another opportunity to submit their score. It asks them again if they want to review and submit their test, and then they will actually exit it. So they've been given 2 other opportunities to check through their answers before actually exiting the test. And that's not the end all be all. As the teacher proctoring the test, you can reopen the assessment. So if a student still submits that test by accident, then you can reopen it and allow them to have extended time or answer questions. But also the teacher has the option to end the assessment as well. So you can set it within a time frame and end the assessment when the teacher decides it needs to be ended. All right. One of the pieces that we know a lot of districts are utilizing pretty heavily now that we absolutely love is the student score summary. And so, again, this is one of those online testing options. When you go to the online test tab, when you are creating the assessment, you can turn this option on. And what it does is you get to pick a window when students can log back into the test and they can view their submitted responses. This allows them to see the questions they got incorrect, and they do not get to see the correct answer. So this works very well for test remediation. You can see in this screenshot, there is the student notepad tool in the bottom, and students can type in their test remediation, their justification for the correct answer after doing some supporting areas of intervention, and they can provide that to their teacher. So you're not having to print out tests or print out a data record. You can have students go back in and actually go through their test remediation. They get to see the reporting category, they get to see the standards. So again, this ties in very heavily with goal setting. So it's nice for students to be able to see exactly what they missed, work on those skill sets, and then do test remediation through this tool. All right, so that was a general overview of the student experience. So we'll pause. We'd like to hear back from you again. What new feature did you learn about related to students and their online testing that you enjoyed? So what new feature did you like? Was it the test revisions, the color overlay option, line reader is also an option, speech to text, or maybe that single sign-on? You liked learning about that, knowing it would be easier for students to get into the system. So you can give us your feedback in the chat. See what you had to say. Oh, single sign-on. And A and E, the test revisions. Yep, that student score summary is an awesome tool to turn on. And again, you get to pick the window when it's available. So making sure maybe even after the testing window, you turn on student score summary. That's a great way to move forward. All right, giving us lots of feedback there. A and D, speech to text, great. You liked learning about that. All right, well, hopefully these were supporting of exactly what students can do within Aware, but also knowing that sometimes students don't know these things either. So a light tap on their shoulder and reminding them that that is one of the main reasons the state went to online testing, is so that students could actually demonstrate their skill set in this online testing environment with all these customization options. So making sure your students know what tools they have is really helpful. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Stephen and talk about the entering answers experience.
Thanks, Emily. So you can kind of see, we kind of are moving through this test process of here's how we can create a test, add our questions, kind of change them into a team test and the student experience. So once that student has or finished their test, there might be some cases where we need to enter answers. And so when we do that, you'll go just like if you were starting that test online, but instead you'll use the enter answer icon, the hand on the keypad, and then you'll choose your classes and click load students. And the students that you've loaded will come up and you can enter these a few different ways, right? Because we also now have the ability to print tests that include these interactive items. So if you had a student that needed a paper version, you can enter their answers. And so you can choose to enter your answers by student. It'll have you click on a student's name and then enter all of their answers. Or we can enter answers by question. Let me click on question 1 and let me score all students or the students that I need to for question 1. And then click question 2 and score all the students for question 2. But then we have the option to score the constructed responses. So it works the same way. So if your assessment had a constructed response question and you don't need to manually enter scores for the other students, but you do need to score this constructed response item, then you can click on the constructed response item and only that question will appear. You'll see that student's response, and then you give that student a score. You'll be able to bring up the rubric to see what that rubric entailed. But then you just enter a score for all of those students and then click review and score, and you've now scored those constructed response items. So by clicking enter answers, you can score by student, by question, or you can score that constructed response question. Once you've scored those questions, if you had any that needed to be scored, we wanted to show you single test analysis. Single test analysis is only available to our Aware Premium districts, but there's some really cool reporting features that you'll have access to. And we wanted to make sure that we showed you this. In single test analysis, we've created this graphical representation on how to look at data, right? In quick views, we kind of have some Excel type of reports or views. And in single test analysis, they're graphic representations, right? It should help you draw conclusions faster with actionable steps, right? And so in that performance summary tab, it's going to simply say, here's the students that approach grade level or whatever performance levels you have set. It's going to have the students within those levels. You'll be able to quickly shift to specific demographics to see how those students did, right? The Learning Standard Summary tab is really that good information. Emily talked about DLK earlier and how we really wanted to start looking at data by depth of knowledge and these easy questions, medium, and hard questions. The Learning Standard Summary will display how the students did on the assessment compared to the performance and the standards, right? And so we want to make sure, and if you'll notice, I know it's moving a little bit quickly, we can see how many times that depth of knowledge was asked. And if you click on that learning standard, it's going to say, here's depth of knowledge 1, and here's all the questions that were asked for DOK 1. For DOK 2, here were the questions that were asked for that standard, and so on. Okay, so really good data on how students are answering by learning standard, but within that learning standard, depth of knowledge. We also have an item response analysis, and this was one of the major things. When we got our STAR results back this year, we only were able to see 0, 1s, and 2s for those technology enhanced items, right? These new item types that were tested, we can only see 0, 1s, and 2s, and we don't know how the student answered or interacted with that question. Well, with the item response analysis, we'll get to see how a percent of students who received points for every question, and it will also display the type of points that question had associated with it. But when you click on that question number, you'll get to see the question, but then you'll also get to see how those students answered, right? Here's the answer distribution. If it was a hot spot, this percent of students chose this spot. This percent of students chose this spot. But you can also click on the student's name to see the actual response that student gave. So you'll get to see how that student specifically interacted with that question. Okay. You'll also be able to add filters on those questions to maybe look for some trends as to why the students are missing that question, right? So you can add filters, show me the students who just answered this way, and just a list of students will come up. Okay?